The decision was momentous. It would publicly have the church defend the Jews. So he did make a decision. He began his papacy in early 39 by burying this document. It is now known to historians as the hidden encyclical. And the French guards tried to block her gaining entrance into the camp. She forced her way past them. She refused to leave without the children. She remains in the camp for the next few days, badgering the guards until the director of the French Red Cross came and negotiated with the French officials to let the children leave. They were let go a few hours before they would have been shipped to Auschwitz, because the Vatican stalled for 10 months, at which point the Commission simply gave up and suspended its work. The Vatican responded by accusing the Jewish members of the Commission of conducting a defamatory campaign against the Church. The International Red Cross makes it a practice to send all of its records to the headquarters in Geneva as soon as practical after each case is closed, making it impossible for the investigation to continue along those lines here. It is the opinion of this writer that an examination of those records in Geneva of all passports issued by the International Red Cross would reveal startling and unbelievable facts. Then Rabbi Herzog raised his head and looked at the young men gathered before him, and he said, "I cannot save those thousands of Jewish children, but I ask of you, how are you going to help rebuild the Jewish people?"
Welcome to History for the Curious. I'm Mena Reisner, and I host the internationally renowned lecturer, dynamic historian, and tour guide, Rabbi Aubrey Hirsch. Experience our history, confront dilemmas, and reveal the untold stories of 3,000 years of Jewish heritage, from Paris to Cairo, from the Russian Tsar to Maimonides, and from the Sinai Revelation to the French Revolution. Join the fastest growing Jewish history podcast in the world by subscribing to this channel and discovering the events that have shaped us into who we are today.
Let's talk about certain church figures. The head of the Austrian section of the Vatican Aid Commission was Bishop Hudal, a Christian anti-Semite German nationalist. In his opinion, many of those persecuted were completely blameless, and he snatched them away from their tormentors. One of these completely blameless people that he helped was Franz Stangl. Franz Stangl was the commandant of the Treblinka extermination camp, where in 1 year between 1942 and 1943, almost 1 million Jews were exterminated. In Rome, when the bishop met him, he greeted him with the words, "You must be Franz Stangl, I've been expecting you," and handed him forged documents that allowed the Nazi war criminal on August 17, 1948, to write to the Red Cross. He got travel documents, he traveled to Syria, his family joins him there, and eventually headed to South America, although the majority of Nazis went directly there, mainly to Argentina, where they knew they would not be extradited. In fact, Argentina was the last country to declare war on Nazi Germany. This bishop later said that what motivated him was helping people, to save a few, as is expected of a true Christian. We do not believe in the hatred taught by the Talmud, but in Christian love, mercy, and forgiveness. And although he is the most notorious of these church figures, he is not an exception, but he stands out because he loved to brag to the press.
When I was the most famous Nazi to escape justice and forge a new life for himself was Adolf Eichmann.
Yes,
was it
this way.
Same way. Why?
Yes, he was given a new identity as Richard Clement, which was a complete invention, obviously. He was turned into a stateless ethnic German. That was the first stage, because if you came from certain places, your identity would be checked. And now he has rights to a Red Cross travel document. His application to the Red Cross is signed off by a Franciscan priest, Father Edward de Mota, who worked clearly with Bishop Hudal to continue assisting German personalities who deserve help. And now he could travel to South America. How grateful was he to the church for helping him escape? Well, once there, Eichmann converted to Catholicism as a result. Then there is the Auschwitz Angel of Death, Josef Mengele, who was also able to escape to Argentina with the help of the Red Cross. On the 16th of May 1949, he arrived in Genoa, where he got a travel document under the name Helmut Gregor. He was only 38. He's a mechanic, born in South Tyrol, as we mentioned earlier, and stateless. And he subsequently ends up in Argentina, and Paraguay, and Brazil, and was one of those that unfortunately never was brought to justice. Then you have Klaus Barbie, the former chief of the Gestapo in Lyon, a brutal torturer. He was a sadist. He killed resistance members. He arrested Jews. After the war, Barbie was wanted by the French authorities for war crimes, never mind the Jews. He was arrested by the Americans, but here, the US, their counterintelligence, thought that he might be useful in fighting communists, so they protected him. and they didn't hand him over to the French authorities for prosecution. But after a couple of years, he was given a Red Cross travel document under the alias of Klaus Altmann and traveled to South America. In 1970, his whereabouts became known. Bolivia extradited him to France in 1983, and he received a life sentence and he died in prison in 1991. Another example, Walter Rauff, who invented the mobile gas chambers, where the exhaust fumes are fed directly back into the vans. According to his arrest warrant, he was responsible for at least 97,000 murders. In 1949, he fled along the Ratlines to Chile. West Germany requested his extradition in 1963. It was rejected because the crimes he was accused of had expired under Chile's statute of limitations, and so he became a wealthy man, a food producer, and he died naturally 40 years later in 1984.
Do we know how many escaped justice?
How many Nazis?
This way? Yeah.
We don't actually. It's somewhere between 300 to 800 high-level Nazis, including 50 known war criminals and mass murderers, thousands of collaborators, fascists in Italy, Hungary, Belgium. In 1946, probably 9,000 Ukrainians from the Waffen-SS division were able to make their way via Italy to Great Britain to Canada. Now, as I say, we don't know the numbers, but it was becoming more obvious that an abuse of the system was taking place. So Vincent Vista, who is a State Department official, an American official in Rome, was sent to investigate. And he wrote a highly critical report to the Secretary of State in Washington regarding these travel documents, and I quote, "The name appearing on the passport is invariably fictitious, and often is only one of several aliases used by the person whose picture it bears, who might have in his possession other passports and identity documents, which he uses at different times for his personal benefit. It is also noted that the picture affixed to the passport is done so with ordinary paste, no seal is impressed through the picture or anywhere, making the common practice in Italy of transferring or changing pictures a very simple one. Unfortunately, this is still what he wrote, International Red Cross makes it a practice to send all of its records to the headquarters in Geneva as soon as practical after each case is closed, making it impossible for the investigation to continue along those lines here. It is the opinion of this writer that an examination of those records in Geneva of all passports issued by the International Red Cross would reveal startling and unbelievable facts." And then he says, "It is possible for any person desiring an identity document to secure an International Red Cross identity document through the assistance of persons operating under the protection of the Vatican. These documents can be secured without any identification and any investigation on behalf of the Red Cross, and these identity cards are recognized as travel documents by Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Cuba, Paraguay, Peru, Spain, Egypt, France, Mexico, Switzerland, Uruguay, and El Salvador." Which means that the Vatican staff were helping murderers to escape, and the Red Cross is guilty of gross negligence. Now, that the documentation could have been handled differently, as I mentioned earlier, is shown by the example of the International Refugee Organization, which was started by the Allies, which took a much stricter approach. The IRO issued papers only to recognize refugees, so ethnic Germans had virtually no chance of securing an IRO document.
You mentioned earlier that the Americans gave one of the high-level Nazis his new identity.
Klaus Barbie, yes.
How'd that happen?
Okay, you can't ignore the role of the US intelligence services in assisting refugees with a Nazi past in what you might call recycling SS agents at the beginning of the Cold War. There's a book called The Paperclip Conspiracy which talks about this. And because the Allies were gearing up to prevent what they called the present danger of communism. And therefore Cold War concerns trumped 1945, reckoning with Nazis. And in fact, as early as 1947, American counterintelligence was itself using a Ratline, smuggling former SS men to advise US intelligence agencies about the Soviets. And they assumed that because they had been dealing with the Soviet Union, they had an expertise, although it has to be said, most of these new agents recruited produced very little valuable information on the Soviet Union. So it's true, the Americans were involved, but their numbers were small in comparison to this deluge.
And you can't compare the agenda, obviously.